What we are going to do is we're going to make an enemy, and we're going to get the enemy to bounce between two paths. So for example in a wall, and it's going to patrol in certain areas. So we're going to add probably about 3 enemies in here. To start the process, I'm going to open my sprites folder, and I'm going to open level 1, and I'm going to click on the enemies folder within. If you haven't made an enemies folder, it's a good idea to make one. I'm going to right click on the enemies folder, go to create, and then I'm going to go to sprite. Now this enemy is going to be a chip or a french fry, so I'm going to give it a name, S enemy FF for french fry, and press enter. Now it doesn't really matter what you call this, as long as you are consistent in your naming conventions. I'm going to click on edit image, and then I'm going to draw a french fry. Now to do this, I'm going to use the line tool, and then I'm going to select a color. Now, I want to get a slightly darker tone than this yellow, so I'm going to double click on the yellow and then bring up the color picker. You can see I can move this over to change the shade and color, or I can use the sliders here to choose a slightly different shade, depending on what I want. Once I'm happy, I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to start to draw. Now, before I actually draw, if you look at the size of this item at the moment, it's only 1 pixel wide, so I need to make it a little bit bigger. Now, in the default brushes, the biggest we've got is 15. However, if I use the slider at the top here, I can go slightly bigger. If I click, hold down with the mouse and drag down, you'll notice that it is drawing now one continuous line. And if I move this over to the right or to the left, you can see the line becomes more jaggedy. Okay. Now, obviously we're zoomed in quite a lot here, but if you had a really large sprite and you were to draw a line like this, then obviously it wouldn't be as jaggedy as that. Once you're happy, leave go, and you can see now we've drawn one line. I'm going to add in 1 or 2 more things to this. So I'm going to click on a new layer here. I'm then going to click on the pencil tool. I'm going to click on my brushes. I'm going to select a white. That obviously is way too big. Let's try this one. There we are, that's not too bad. So let's click on that one there, and then let's click on that one there. That's about equal. We're going to add in 1 more thing here. And we've got 2 pairs of eyes. Now you can see I've made a bit of a mistake here. If you do make mistakes, you can do a Control Z or on a Mac Command Z to undo, and then you can redo whatever it is you need. I'm going to do 1 more thing by adding a little mouth onto this french fry. So we're going to click on a new layer here, and then we're going to click on the draw. I'm going to actually then click on a grey, or maybe I'll go with a lighter grey than this, and we're just going to draw a line going across. Now you'll notice one of the more difficult things about drawing a line freehand is that you need to keep it so that it doesn't sort of go away with the mouse, but you can see I've managed to do this now just about. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with this design. I'm going to close my sprite, and that has saved it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the object. I'm going to open the objects, open the level 1, and then right click on the enemies folder. We're going to go to create, and then we're going to go to object. Now I need to name this, so I'm going to call it O enemy FF, and then we bind the sprite to the object. Now if I just head back to my room for a second and add in a new layer, I'm going to rename this layer here. I'm adding instance layer, by the way, that one there. So I'm going to call this enemy. And then I'm going to add 1 or 2 enemies in here. So I'm just going to click, drag, and drop them in. Now, as you can see, as I'm dropping these in, these are snapping to a grid because I've got the grids turned on. If you wanted to put the enemy in a specific way, you can turn the grids off, and then you can drag it in to pretty much wherever you want as an absolute position. Just make sure you turn the grids back on once you're done. Now if I play my game, you'll notice that the enemies are not actually going to move. Like that. My player can still move. There's nothing wrong there, but my enemies here cannot move. So let's sort that out first. What we're going to do is open the O enemy object here by double clicking on it, and we are going to get them to move and bounce. Now, the first part of this is we're going to add a create event, and we're going to create a variable. Now, this variable is going to be called enemy speed. So I'm going to hold down with the mouse on the var, and then drag that in. I'm naming this enemy speed, and I'm going to give the enemy speed a value of 3. Now this variable will be able to be accessed anywhere in this object here. We now need to apply this enemy speed to the X of the enemy here. So to do that, we're going to use a step event. So I click on add event, step, and then click on step. We're going to add in a var. We're going to say X is enemy speed, and then I'm going to say it's relative. Now what this does, it adds enemy speed onto X. So as enemy speed is currently set to 3, it's basically going to add 3 to the X position. Now if I press play, watch what's going to happen to all of my enemies. So the enemies will just go towards the right, which is exactly what we want them to do, but they also go off the screen. So we now need to stop that and get them to bounce back. So when they hit the blue wall, they are going to bounce back to the other way. So what we need to do is do a collision. So I click on add event, and then we go down to collision with the object O wall. So when we collide, what we need to do, if I just explain the concept behind this, the X position is set to 3. So it's going to move to the right, and then as soon as it hits the wall, what we want is the X to become a minus. So instead of being positive 3, we need it to become negative 3. That way, it'll go back, then the other way. And then when we hit that wall, we need another event to happen so that the minus 3 then becomes a positive, and then it goes back the other way. So we've got positive 3, and then when we hit the blue again, as you can probably guess, it becomes negative. So this then will be our back and forth, back and forth. Now, to do this, it's fairly easy. We add a collision between the enemy and the wall. And what we do is we add a little bit of code in here as a variable, and we say enemy speed, and then we say enemy speed multiplied by -1. Now what that does is it turns whatever enemy speed is, initially it's a positive figure, so it turns 3 into a -3. And if enemy speed is -3 and we multiply it by a negative, it then becomes a positive. Now if we play this, what you'll see then is these enemies will start to bounce, and they'll bounce then between these 2 points. Now if the enemy sticks, and this can happen sometimes, if the enemy sticks into one of the walls, that's usually caused because you've used too many blocks here. This needs to be using a solid block. Let me just give you a really quick demonstration. Let's say, for argument's sake, on this block here, we basically have a split halfway. What can happen is when this enemy hits this block, it'll freeze. So let's just see if that will actually happen now with this example. Okay, so you can see there now that is frozen. If that happens to you, very easy to solve. Just make sure that wherever the enemy is hitting, it's a solid area here. You can have a split later on or higher up here, but the enemy will need to hit on a solid part there. If I just replay this game. And as you can see, it's now going back here. Now the next thing that we'll be doing in the next video is having some form of interaction with our enemy and our player. So we're going to basically look at what happens when we collide between the enemy and the player. So what is going to happen to the actual player and what will happen to our score as well.